We have a very. I'm okay, Angelina. I only have about 5 more minutes to talk to y'all before the show start. But thank you all for joining in for this show. I think we've got a pretty good show tonight. Hello, Miss French. Thank you for joining. Pookie. I know you don't like to be called Pookie, but Jay, thanks for joining, Jay. Miss Gazaway. Just Janine. My AKA sister, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hi, Jay Thomasina French. I know you're gonna get me on Sunday for saying that, but Jean Marie. But thanks for joining. We're gonna get started with the show here in just a few minutes. And I think we have a pretty good show tonight. We can tell them some pre-show tidbits, Mr. Payne, about our stint in law school, being the only two African Americans in the law class at Chase College of Law back in the middle 80s.
That last will and testament class.
I do. I remember that professor, too. I hope he's not watching.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's dead.
I told you he didn't like me. And
right.
He was going to get a bad grade if he didn't assign me.
And we had some crazy professors up there. And we had some good ones. We had some good ones, too.
Yeah. Gene Krause.
Hello, Charlotte Daly. Thanks for joining. Mr. Tompkins from, where are you, in Cincinnati or Columbus now? Where are you cooking at these days, Carlos? You know, Carlos is a Trump supporter. I had him at my house before the election, man. I was debating him about Trump, and no matter how much dirt I told him on Trump, he said, I still like him. Oh, there's some water if you want it there. Okay. You want some water? Yeah. And some peppermint. What's up, KP? What's up, Carlos? Yeah. You still like Trump, man? Or Cincinnati? Are you in Cincinnati? Okay, good. Thanks for joining. You still like Trump, Carlos? I'm just curious. Because I can't wait for an evangelical to log on to the show and tell me that they still like Trump. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it. But I guess maybe evangelicals get spanked with magazines with their picture on it, too. I don't know. But we're not going to go there tonight. This is a better show tonight, so we're not going to talk about that. I called it on Trump. Well, I mean, you know, anybody can call it a fixed game. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a fixed game. You know, like a fixed basketball game. Hello, Miss Pittman. But please do us a favor tonight, for those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live, please share this broadcast. We think we have a very interesting broadcast tonight, a very good broadcast tonight. I'm not going to be with you next week. We're going to take the week off next week, but the week after next is going to be a really, really good show. Okay, Carlos, I can't see that. Maybe I'm going to move that brick a little bit. He's destroying this. Oh. Thanks. He's destroying this broken system. Yeah. I'm going to let you know a secret, Carlos. The system was not broke. It was broke before Obama came in, and it took Obama 8 years to fix it. Once he fixed it, the system's back to normal. But so we got less than 60 seconds. There. Oh, this stuff. Sometimes these cameras show everything. Anyway, we're about to get started with the show, so thank you for joining me on Facebook Live. We're going to try to squeeze in. I wish I had brought a box. I didn't put that on and push that back a little bit more. But I got a studio. No, I mean, I think we're good. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere else we can go. We'll just get to stay squeezed in. Thank you for joining us, Karen Fuller. See you this weekend, Carlos. What's going on this weekend? Probably, I guess you won't see me this weekend. unless you'll come into my church this weekend. I'm going to be at church this weekend on Easter Sunday. I got to sing, man. You should come and hear me sing. I do a pretty good job. All right, it's 9 o'clock. So whenever you're ready. Yep.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
Good evening. This is Conscious Fever. I'm Carl Price here on 97thebeatfm.com. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us on this rainy night here in Louisville, Kentucky. My guest tonight on this episode of Conscious Fever, the episode that we call The Story of Tom Payne, is attorney Darrell Payne of Cincinnati, Ohio. Attorney Payne, thank you for joining me, sir. How are you doing tonight?
Carl, good seeing you. Always good to see you. Pleasure.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you. So you made it here without getting too wet.
Yes, we're getting some really bad downpours of rain up in Ohio.
Yeah, I was talking. Yeah, come and check me out, Carlos. But I'm not gonna talk to you guys anymore. I got to do the show. But anyway, yeah, it's probably because I thought that Trump supporter I was talking to before the show started was in Columbus, but he's in Cincinnati, so I understand why y'all are getting bad weather up there. Absolutely. But welcome to Conscious Fever here on 97thebeatfm.com. I'm Carl Price, your host. Again, my guest tonight is attorney Darrell Payne of Cincinnati, Ohio, who's also a native of Louisville, Kentucky, and who just happens to be the one of the younger brothers of the subject of our show tonight. The young man we're going to be talking about tonight is Thomas Payne. So without further ado, we're just going to get right into it, and I'm going to get started off here. Just to give you all some a background of what we're talking about. But Thomas Robert Payne was born on November 19, 1950. He's a former professional basketball player. Also a former professional boxer, and according to some, a convicted rapist. He a 7'1" center. Payne, actually, 7'1". He played with the Atlanta Hawks of the NBA during the 1971 and the 1972 season. Tommy, as he's often referred to, was also the first African American ever to play basketball for the University of Kentucky. I've, of course, been a University of Louisville fan. But anyway, Payne is currently incarcerated in the Kentucky State Reformatory. Tommy Payne is the eldest of 9 children, and Tommy broke one record in birth, from what we understand, Darrell. He was the longest baby ever to have been born at one of the local hospitals here, and I'm assuming that was Louisville General Hospital,
Yes.
or maybe a military hospital, because but anyway, but he grew up in a family, from what I understand, where academics were stressed. His father had attained the rank of Master Sergeant in the United States Army before retiring, from what I understand. And of course, his mother was a college graduate. Your mother was a college graduate. She had a degree in biology, and 8 siblings.
Yes.
Were also educated with a total of 14 college degrees in the Payne family.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Including 2 medical degrees, MD degrees, and 1 law degree.
Yes.
Right. But according to all we know, despite Tommy's height and his incredible physical skills, Payne was basically a newcomer to basketball, from what we understand. Mm-hmm. He didn't play basketball or organize basketball, from what we understand, until his sophomore year or his sophomore season at Shawnee High School here in Louisville. And of course, I went to Shawnee Junior High School. I know you attended Shawnee High School also.
Yes.
Yeah. But his senior year, he was one of the most coveted players in the nation. And we say coveted players, of course, we're talking about basketball, with Kentucky and UCLA recruiting him. Now, let me just pause and just say for a second, for all of you all who were not around in the early 70s, if you were a basketball player coming out of high school and Kentucky and UCLA were looking at you, you were somebody.
Yes.
Is that fair to say? Yeah, absolutely fair to say. And on June 9th, 1969, from my research, Attorney Payne, I can call you Darrell. I'll call you Darrell. This high school All-American signed with the University of Kentucky. He was not only the tallest player ever to play at the University of Kentucky. I understand he was also legendary. He was also legendary coach Adolph Ruff's first African-American player. Now, of course, back then they would have said first Negro player or the first black player. But after a short stint at the University of Kentucky, Tommy was drafted, from what we understand, by the Atlanta Hawks. And his promising career ended in May of 1972 when the police and in Georgia arrested him after investigating separate crimes in the Atlanta area, specifically rape and some sexual crimes. But he was indicted in Kentucky also during that time in connection with one rape and one attempted rape. And in 1972, he was convicted and charged again with aggravated sodomy. Well, I'm sorry. He was convicted of aggravated sodomy in Atlanta, and my understanding, rape. Served 5 years in prison there, and in Georgia, 2.5 of those in solitary confinement for the participation in a prison riot. But immediately after his release from prison in Georgia, Tommy was extradited to Kentucky, where he was convicted on 1 count of rape and 2 counts of attempted rape. He served 5 years in prison in Kentucky before being paroled in 1983. So that's just sort of a little backdrop. Right now, Tommy is incarcerated in the Kentucky State Reformatory. And the reason we chose the topic of Tommy Payne for this particular show, because I understand from knowing about Tommy's story for a long while now that something just doesn't seem right. Just doesn't seem right. And I know, I mean, I'm going to just go there and say that because, I'm a lawyer, you're a lawyer, and there are a lot of details that we understand about the background that the public doesn't know. So hopefully we can educate the public on some of that background tonight, particularly that in Kentucky. Well, first of all, what I found interesting about the story, Attorney Payne, and then Darrell, and then I'm going to let you churn in, is that actually the crimes in Kentucky, where he is now incarcerated and has been incarcerated for what we estimate to be 42 years?
44.
44 years now. The crimes in Kentucky actually occurred before he left to go to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And they let him go. And one of the reasons, from what I understand from the research, the reason they let him go was because there was some discrepancy with the identification by the victim. At least that's my understanding. And it wasn't until he was charged and convicted in Georgia that they decided to bring him back to Kentucky and convict him, and actually charge him, try him, and convict him. The interesting thing about all of this, and I want you to churn in on this, Darrell, is that after he went into custody in Atlanta, many people may think that at some point he was released and then tried again, engaged in conduct, but actually this was conduct that predated his departure from Kentucky, right? So actually when he got convicted in Kentucky, he was actually in custody. Yes. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, so I want you to just churn in. Talk to us about the story of Tom Payne, those little details that maybe we don't know, and you can just pick up wherever you want to pick up in reference to this.
Well, first let me say thank you so much for being courageous enough to talk about Tom Payne. That seems to be a hush-hush thing now. He's been in prison now in the Kentucky system for over 25 years. And when he was released in California, which I'll get to how that situation transpired, Kentucky, believe it or not, drove all the way out to California, picked him up, brought him back here, and
That's a 24-hour drive, ain't it?
at least
At least. Okay.
3 days.
3 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Now that's unheard of. Let's just so the audience understands that's unheard of, particularly with Tommy's circumstance. I want you to tell them why it was unheard of then and would be unheard of today. Because actually, out in California, he served 6 years longer than he should have.
right, because someone in Kentucky had given him a bad assessment of what actually happened in Kentucky, and so under the laws in California is where you serve enhancement time. You serve enhancement time for a repeated offense. So they charge him as a repeated offender. And what we come to realize was that he didn't repeat the offense. He was arrested in Atlanta, never given parole. Bond. Generally for a first-time offender, you
Absolutely.
you get bond or some type of bond hearing to let you out until your trial, because you're not presumed guilty until you have a trial.
Right.
Well, let me also go back and say that when my brother was picked up, he was only 20 years old, so he still basically wasn't even an adult. So Atlanta Hawks should have notified my parents that he was locked up. We actually was looking at TV one night and saw him on TV
Oh, wow.
in handcuffs.
Oh, wow.
And so when my parents called down to the Atlanta Hawks organization to inquire about it, they had taken $35,000 of his money out of the bank, hired him an attorney, and we knew nothing of anything.
Interesting.
So during his time in Atlanta, well, let me go back also because I want to be clear. Initially, when Tommy left University of Kentucky, he had made his decision to go ahead and go to turn professional. Back then, it was unheard of for a sophomore to turn professional like they do the one and done this year. That was unheard of, but he was in a group with Dr. J, Jim Jones, Johnny Newman. He was one of the first that they drafted to go hardship that year. Hardship was tantamount to what they call
One and done
today.
And that was the first year
And that
for
was
it,
the
right?
first
And,
year for it.
and 13 college players opted to take that opportunity to go to the pros.
That's correct.
And my understanding is that Tommy was drafted number 2 overall. Was it number 2 overall?
Number 2 overall.
Number 2 overall. Okay.
And Johnny Newman number 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the weekend that he went up to Pittsburgh with his agent to work out the deal to go to Atlanta, 2 detectives came to my parents' home, and they said that we're here to investigate your son. He was alleged to have committed 2 rape charges. And my mom and dad, they asked them, well, what day did this happen on? And so they said, well, it happened on these such a days. And then they said, well, he couldn't have done it. He's been gone. He was gone on those days with his agent.
Interesting.
So what happened was that was a whole year after he was with the Atlanta Hawks. And see, in hindsight and looking back now, my mom and dad probably should have made noise about that.
About that, yeah.
Because this is right after he left University of Kentucky and decided that he wasn't going to go back. That all of a sudden now they're coming to our door and saying that he's alleged rape defendant.
Right.
Potential.
Right. Let me just pause a second because I think this background is necessary. The suspicious background. I just want to talk just briefly about the suspicious background, right? He's a high school standout, highly recruited by the UCLA. John Wooden was at UCLA then, right?
Yes.
Yeah, John Wooden was still
Crum
there.
was there too.
And Denny
He was
Crum was there,
assistant coach.
right?
Yeah.
He's highly recruited. University of Kentucky goes out on the limb and signs him as their first black player at the time.
Yes.
Okay, and so they really, this was a big investment for the University of Kentucky.
Yes.
And from what I understand, Tommy did not play the first year he was there. We can get into that in just a second, but he did not play the first year he was there. So he really gave Kentucky about 1 season.
Correct.
And they expected, back then, just so everybody understands this, back then, it was unheard of. There were no one and dones. Right? No one and dones. You went 4 years. So sort of like, and I'm only saying this because as I read the research, it seemed to me that the investment for Kentucky was, we are breaking the color barrier not only for the University of Kentucky, but also for the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, recruiting signing this first African-American player. and notwithstanding that he was ultra talented, and he was going to bring Rupp on his years out to another national championship. But he left.
Also, be mindful of the year that he left. That next year they probably would have won the national.
And why would they have won the national championship?
Because they won the SEC that year, and they made it to the NCAA, and they had all their players that were excellent ball players coming back to play for the subsequent years. So
interesting.
And you're right. Rupp was on his last years there at the University of Kentucky, and they wanted to win a championship for that reason.
Okay, and I only said that tidbit because I think that's where the suspicion started. At least that's where it starts for me. When I read the research, when I read about Tom Payne, it's almost like Kentucky, the University of Kentucky had a vested interest in this man, and he disappointed them by opting to go to the NBA very early, taking the opportunity, the one-and-done opportunity, as we call it today, which was unheard of then. And I'm sure that was a shock. I'm sure Joe B. Hall did not expect that because Joe B. Hall signed him. Rupp didn't sign. Well, at least Joe B. Hall was in the
recruited him.
Right, recruited him. Different thing. But let me just get back to these detectives. Let me just put this in perspective also before you start talking again, Darrell. My understanding is that in Atlanta, as well as Kentucky, we're not talking about the rape charges that he had or the sexual assault charges that he had. These were cases that were being investigated.
Correct. Yeah.
Waiting for something to pop out.
Yeah. Yes.
And when Tommy got arrested in Atlanta, then something popped out in Kentucky. And I made the point earlier that there was some discrepancy about his height, and said the suspect been 6'3" and Tommy was 7'2", and so Kentucky just let him go to Atlanta because they didn't feel like they had enough evidence. But once he was arrested in Atlanta, then all of a sudden they've got some more. They've got enough evidence. Correct. It's kind of anyway. I'm just setting the stage for the suspicion, and let me just let you continue on.
And so, what I was going to say? Well, first of all, people need to understand that Tommy didn't necessarily want to go to University of Kentucky. Tommy was looking towards Bradley University, UCLA, and Florida State, where former basketball star, high school star Ron King and Otto Petty went to school.
Okay.
But my father, seeing that we were military kids, we grew up on military bases most of our lives, didn't think Tommy was mature enough to go away from the state. So we decided that UK would be a good fit for him, because it was close to home.
Right.
They wanted to build a program around him. And so they went to their graves with that because they felt like they forced him to go there when he didn't want to go there.
Okay. And you said they went to the grave. So both of your parents have not passed.
Yes.
And I'm going to talk to you about being at the games, but I understand that we have a caller. Caller, are you there?
I am there, yes, sir.
Yes. Who do we have the luxury
Dale
of?
Brown from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and for all of those people that used to holler at me in Kentucky, sit down, Dale, I forgive you.
All right. Well, Mr. Brown,
also,
Coach Brown.
Those that said that.
Yeah, actually, Coach Dale Brown. Thank you for calling in the Conscious Fever.
I was Coach Dale Brown, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Coach Dale Brown.
Well,
You've got the floor.
Why in the world am I calling? Why am I interfering with Kentucky business? Well, it all starts by a guy by the name of Rudy Macklin. Rudy Macklin played basketball with Darrell Payne. And Rudy and I were going to Kentucky LSU basketball game in Lexington. And I'd remembered Thomas Payne in 1969, the All-American high school player signed by Kentucky, a monumental thing. And I thought, oh, man, Kentucky's going to get better and better and better. Well, we went, Rudy and I rented a car and drove over the day before the ball game. We drove over to Sandy Hook, Kentucky. The warden, I believe he was, if he wasn't the warden, he was a prison guard, but I thought he was the warden, gave us permission to visit with Thomas. And I'd never talked to Thomas on the telephone. I'd never met him. I didn't know anything about him that was going on these past years, except he'd been in prison for the crimes he committed. So as we were walking down, the warden or the prison guard, I believe he was the warden, was a big basketball fan. Who isn't in Kentucky a big basketball fan? The greatest fans in the country, by the way, and the most knowledgeable. Well, he got talking, and he says, Coach Brown, I want to tell you something. He said, Thomas Payne, I've been in prison working, a litany of years, and he said, this is no question the finest young man he committed crimes. He's here because of that. And he's paying his duty, but he said, he really belongs out. He said, he served his time, and Well, then we got to meet with Thomas. I was amazed by several things. One, I was amazed, first of all, with his gentleness and kindness and honesty about what happened, and also how intellectual he was. Well, go back and examine the family. I became a very close friend of the mama of the family. Now, the daddy I didn't get to meet, but here's a guy that spent 2 years in college, became a master sergeant, 27 years in the Army, served in the Korean War. Mama. Now, remember this. This isn't the best times in the world for African Americans in the South. She got a major in biology from Louisville and a master's degree in criminal justice. The family itself, 8 brothers and sisters. 2 sisters are doctors. Everyone in the family has a college degree. So my call is in tonight. And I've talked to John Calipari about it, and I sent a letter to the governor of Kentucky, not trying to interfere or lessen any crime that was committed. But this man could do so, and the reason I know this, I know a young man that got out here, and he has helped so many people to keep them from going to prison, to teach them a lesson. So the prison system certainly isn't perfect, like none of us are, but my golly, I would back this guy 100% today. I used to recruit players, and I'd say to myself when I'm recruiting them, would I want them to babysit my daughter? Thomas Payne, I would trust with the most precious jewels that I have, which is my family. Oh, so wow. I'm calling to just anybody that's listening and anybody that can ask. Now, I know this might be a controversial area, the fact that, well, this happened is this, but enough is enough. And to err is human, but to forgive is divine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it is an honor to hear from you. I was about to slip up and call you Coach Brown again, but you're the legendary LSU coach, Dale Brown, from back in the day where LSU and Kentucky would, you would just come here and just spank butt at the University of Kentucky. Right. How about that?
It's a shame that they had to eliminate that rivalry. That we don't play twice a year, because it was truly one of the great. Talk about North Carolina and Duke, LSU and Kentucky were headed that way. Mm-hmm. And one final thing, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. Most Kentucky people will be shocked at this. When I got the job in '72, I got an SEC media guy, and who are we going to be fighting against? Holy mackerel! Kentucky had won more championships than anybody in the league combined. All the teams combined. All the teams had not won as many championships, and Kentucky was way ahead of them. So the first meeting I ever had in the athletic dorm, I wrote on the board, our competition, and I put number 1, Kentucky, times LSU's beaten Kentucky once. Average loss on the road, 25 points. That's who we're heading for. It's not Tulane University. It's not Tennessee. Well, I'm sure they left this Yankee, this carpetbagger. He must be wacky. How are we going to catch them? Kentucky was the stimulant. Maybe we couldn't equal them, but we sure were going to give it a good try. And we got beat around quite a bit early in the years, but it turned out to be a great rivalry. And amazingly, some of the players that I absolutely am fond of today, and we keep in communication, Sam Bowie, Kyle Macy, Kenny Skywalker. Kentucky does have the greatest fan base, and I think the greatest overall basketball program in the country. And probably the greatest coach right there. And Joe B. Hall, if you're listening tonight, why'd you let me throw my jacket out in the middle of the court? As a friend, you should have stopped me, right?
Wow, and I remember that.
Do you know the whole story on it?
I do not know the whole story, but since we have the honor of having you on, why don't you tell us the story, Coach?
I certainly will, but I was a no-name guy from North Dakota. I mean, I had no credentials. They asked for references. Who was I going to get it from? The high school janitor or somebody? But so when I got the break to come to LSU, I really wanted to build a good program. And we went to Kentucky, and I was telling the guys we'd go up there and get beat by 20, 25, 30, and et cetera. We're playing one night, and all of our team, we don't have anybody else to put in. He's fouled them all out. And Joe was up being very vociferous. As soon as I stood up and asked a question, sit down, they told me. So near the end of the game, with 2 minutes, I called timeout, and I called the referee over. I said, I want you to do something. I was very low-key. Look at our guys on the bench with tears in their eyes. It's hard enough to come up here, but we fouled everybody out, and that's just not right. You've taken everything else from us, and I took off my sport jacket. So I said, you might as well have my sport coat, too. Come on, Coach Brown. He said, don't do it. No. Take it or I'll throw the darn thing out on the court. Never dreaming I was going to have to do it. So anyway, no. I said, okay. So I took 2 steps, but I can't explain. It was like a helicopter taking off. And where did it have to land? Right on the big K in the middle of the court. So I doubt if I won many votes for governor in Kentucky that night.
Well, Coach, and forgive me for continuing to call you Coach, but I think it's more appropriate to say the legendary.
I certainly accept that and hope I'll be a coach of life the rest of my life.
Absolutely, legendary LSU coach Darrell Brown. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for giving me the pleasure. And Darrell, I didn't get to talk to you, so howdy.
All right, Coach.
Okay, thanks a lot for the opportunity.
All right,
Bye.
Thank you. That's the legendary LSU men's basketball coach, Darrell Brown. Had some really good comments to make about your brother.
Yeah, and I think what I really want people to know is, we're done dealing with what happened, what should have happened, what didn't happen, all those things, because
Absolutely.
Tommy has done 44 years in prison now. What's really important to know is that when you have a loved one in prison, your family, relatives, and everybody are mentally, emotionally incarcerated with them.
Wow.
And so for the last 44 years, being that this was my best friend, the guy that I looked up to, my role model.
Right, your big brother.
My big brother.
Right.
Has been incarcerated all these years. Mentally, emotionally, I've been incarcerated with him.
Oh, interesting.
And so, it's hard to see him go through that, being an attorney, knowing all the avenues that I've traveled to try to free him, exonerate him, or emancipate him from prison. And the rejection and the things that are happening at this very moment. I mean, consider this, that after he did 6 years over in California, they brought him back to Kentucky. They took him up for a parole hearing, and they gave him a 15-year deferment.
A 15-year deferment. I mean, which was akin to a 21-year deferment, right? Because he had done 6 that he shouldn't have done in Kentucky based on some false information that had come from Kentucky.
Correct. And the deferment without parole. So from 2000 to 2014, he served time without parole for parole violation.
Absolutely.
He goes back up in 2014, and they say, we're not ready to be released. We're going to bring you back in 2016. And then he goes back up in 2016, and he actually has a woman who's basically hearing his case tell him that you owe Kentucky a debt.
Interesting.
That was all she told him. She didn't tell him what he needed to do or what might be necessary for him to come before them to have done when he come before him the next time. She told him, you owe Kentucky a debt.
And this is a member of the parole board.
Correct.
Member of the parole board. Well, that's really interesting. Well, we're going to have to take a break, but on the other side of this break, Darrell, I want you to take us back some 40 years or so, 35 or 40 years, I think it's about 40 years, into those days where you and your dad used to go and watch Tommy play at the University of Kentucky, and you all were literally the ink spots there in terms of the fan base at the University of Kentucky, just to see your big brother play, because he's the first African American, and all of what the atmosphere was like, coming to watch the only African American, the first African American basketball player there at the University of Kentucky, who just happened to be your big brother and your father. And I just wanted you, to take us back to that time. So we're going to take a quick break, a quick music break. This is Conscious Fever. I'm Carl Price on 97tobeatfm.com with the assistance of DJ Ice. We'll be right back right after this break.
502, stand up. These are just jokes. No harm is ever intended. Absolutely no one is to be offended. Is bringing you his monthly comedy show held at the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel. Big Mike's Comedy Blast, 2735 Crittenden Drive. Again, that Hilton Garden Inn Hotel, 2735 Crittenden Drive. Big Mike's Comedy Blast. And on stage this month, we have comedian Marvin Hunter.
Louisville, Kentucky. It's your boy, comedian Marvin Hunter, man. April 14th, man. April 14th. Don't miss it, man. Big Mike's Comedy Fest at the Hilton Garden Inn by the airport. We're gonna be there showing our natural behind, man. I'm trying to get some of that Kentucky bourbon y'all have up there, man. Make sure y'all show up, man. You don't want to miss this. I'm gonna keep my zipper all the way down so it'll be easy for me to take my pants off and show my natural ass. But you know how I get out. But it's your boy comedian Marvin Hunter.
For this event, you must be 18 to enter, 21 to drink. Doors open at 7. Show starts at 8:30. Tickets can be purchased from Eventbrite or Jam Bust Balloons and more, or Shelock's Beauty Salon. DJ Ice on the 1s and 2s. And remember, always, clapping is optional, but laughter is a must. Get your tickets now.
You can't handle the truth.
You have a story to tell, and your story could be intimate and personal or something you want the entire world to see, because a tattoo is the most unique and personal form of individual expression. And body art is a master's craft. So when you decide to let somebody draw on your canvas, you need to seek out the truth. Truth's Tattoos have been creating world-class body art for over 10 years, and there's nothing the truth can't handle. Check out Truth's Tattoos on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll see there's other tattoo artists, and there's the truth. Stop being lied to and book your next tattoo appointment with the truth at 502-408-8403.
Yeah, come on.
Fellas, it's your duty to please that booty. Girl, drop it like it's hot, like your big booty duty.
Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, rollin'. Let me see you rollin', look it. Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, rollin', look it now. I need me some lovin'. I'm looking for me tonight. Want you to put that thing on me. Want you to do this body right, body right. Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, rollin', look it now, rollin', look it. Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, rollin', look it now, rollin', look it. Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, rollin', look it now, rollin'. All my ladies, 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 get a man to make you feel real good. Give me that honey love, give me that tasty love. Kiss my neck, my love, make me sweat, my love. Give me that honey love, give me that tasty love. Kiss my neck, my love, let's get a little dirty love. Want you to put that thing on me. Want you to do this body right, body right, this body right. Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, just rollin', look it now, rollin', look it. Suki, uki, suki, uki. Rollin', look it now, rollin', look it, rollin', look it now, rollin', rollin', rollin'.
Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
All right, welcome back to Conscious Fever here on 97thebeatfm.com. I'm Carl Price, your host. My guest tonight is attorney Darrell Payne of Cincinnati, Ohio, and a true native of Louisville, Kentucky, and the younger brother of the individual who is the subject. Yeah, right. L7 is what they call it, right? Yeah. The younger brother of the subject of our show tonight, which is Thomas Robert Payne, affectionately known as Tommy Payne or Tom Payne. But welcome back to Conscious Fever. I got a couple of bills to pay here. I don't know if they're bills, DJ Ice, but I'm going to say it anyway. I want to remind you all about the fight that's coming up, the Jose Sulaiman World Invitational fight, Real Deal, Holyfield Promotions, Louisville, TKO. But the fight is going to take place at the KFC Yum Center on April 27, 2018. Tickets are now on sale at the KFC Yum Center box office as well as Ticketmaster. It's going to be televised on ESPN. And this is boxing, professional boxing, WBC boxing, professional boxing back here in Louisville in the name and following the likes of the great Muhammad Ali, our homeboy. One of the promotion I want to talk about if my microphone will cooperate, is that Saturday is the Praise Dance Extravaganza, Praise and Dance in His Name. And it's open to all, gospel, hip-hop, and the step teens, no solo acts. But this is going to take place on March 31st, 2018 at 4 p.m. at Shawnee High School. Tickets $10 in advance and $15 at the door. That is Praise Dance Extravaganza, Praise and Dance in His Name. So this is Conscious Fever. I'm Carl Price here on 97thebeatfm.com. Again, my host tonight is attorney Darrell Payne of Cincinnati and a native of Louisville, Kentucky. So Darrell, I want to get back to, before we went on break, I asked that if we could come back and talk about something that I read. And what I read, just in 15 seconds, what I read was that there was a time when Tommy, and back in 72, when Tommy went to the University of Kentucky to play and was actually playing, you and your dad would go to the games.
Yes, home games.
To the home games. Yeah. How old were you at the time?
I was 12 years old.
Okay, you were 12-year-olds at the time. Talk to us about the atmosphere. I mean, you all, there couldn't have been a huge African-American fan base at the University of Kentucky at that time.
Not at all. But before I talk about the atmosphere, I also want to set the stage for Tommy's mindset, because here he was just out of high school, first girlfriend, he had gotten her pregnant, and my father was old school, so he made him marry her.
Gotcha.
So when he matriculated at University of Kentucky, here he was with a baby at 18, married for the first time, and going to a school where black people didn't want him to go there because of all the things that were said about the institution, and because they didn't recruit African Americans, didn't want him, and white people didn't want him there because they didn't want to integrate.
Right. So it wasn't unusual for him to hear the N-word on a regular basis.
Oh, my God. I mean, we would go to the games, and the racial epithets that were hollered out and said. I mean, first of all, you only had African Americans in the stands that were selling the peanuts and popcorn and things like that.
Okay.
Aside from that, we would just be like dots in a
ink spots. Yeah.
Ink spots in a audience of white people. So
now, were they directing these at Tom?
Every time.
And was this the Kentucky fan base or the opposing team, or both?
It was both.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, it was horrible down south. I mean, playing in Mississippi, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, all those schools down there back then, Tennessee. Tommy had actually gotten ejected from 3 or 4 games.
Right.
Because of the things that were going on that he just couldn't deal with anymore.
Had to take a toll.
But the real irony about it all was now that I think back at the age that I am now, what my father must have had to go through and withstood during those times, being that was his son on the court playing, and then he had to sit up there and put up with that. And I wonder sometimes how hard it must have been for him. I didn't really understand a lot of it, but the N-word, I knew what that was.
Right. And we're talking about a master sergeant in the United States Army.
Correct.
Retired.
And also, we had to transit into a civilian life. We were we were in the Army barracks with other ethnic groups, and so we wasn't really familiar with racism and things that happened to a lot of black people back then, because it was like a melting pot. Everybody got along and everybody did everything together. But, sometimes it was harder for Tommy to play at University of Kentucky and Memorial Coliseum than it was on the road.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Tommy's incarceration and this stint of 44 years. And, there's been, from what I understand from my research, there's been so much interest in Tom Payne, but it seems like the interest creeps up to the door and then it turns back. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why that is, other than I think that, first of all, as a former prosecutor, I think it's all questionable. Now, the last thing I want to do is de-victimize anybody that has ever been a victim. But, justice is justice. Yeah. And as a former prosecutor, you're a former prosecutor, and as attorneys, the justice system should be all about fairness. I'm not sure if I agree that we're seeing complete fairness with somebody who has served 44 years, and I can't what I can't get out of my mind is that I can be sitting in a courtroom right now and listening to a judge saying, well, if we had brought him back to Kentucky from California and violated him, we would have given him probably 5 years, maybe 3 years, maybe 2 years. But he served 6 years over out there and came back, and then they gave him an additional 15 years.
Correct.
Just doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
So tell us just a little bit more about, and before you say that, and you let me know if I'm talking too much, because this is Conscious Fever, but I'm not supposed to talk as much as I talk.
You're very astute about his situation,
about
what's happened, and all the things that you're saying are right on point in terms of what up to this point.
Well, I tell you, it was like looking at the research on this. The production research, what I learned so much about Tommy, and I do remember one time back in the 90s, I met Tommy for the first time. Remember out in California, we flew out to Los Angeles and drove up to Sacramento, and everything that Dale Brown, that the legendary LSU coach Dale Brown said on this show just a few minutes ago was just so true. That was the experience that I had with Tommy. So, talk to us about his situation today and why it appears to be so difficult to recognize that without demeaning the victims, to recognize that I have seen individuals who have been convicted of murder twice over who have not served 44 years.
And I have to say this because I feel that way, that if this were not Tom Payne, former University of Kentucky ball player, and he's in for the same thing and did the same scenario, he would have been out.
He would have been out.
That's how I feel in my heart. I mean, and when you go back and look at the evidence in area, and I'm not trying to retry his case.
Absolutely.
But when you think about our burden of proof that we have to have as prosecutors, criminal attorneys, beyond a reasonable doubt, when a woman can get on the stand and say that a guy is 6'2", who's 7'2", and you can't expect a person to know exact heights all the time in a courtroom, but it seems to me that unequivocally she would say that he was very tall.
He was very tall, absolutely.
And then when you have a situation where you have a 7-foot guy who's convicted of raping a woman in a Corvette, just the ideal how a 7-footer gets a woman in a Corvette, gets her clothes off, and then commits the act, And then, it's like with Tommy, everything has been punitive, I mean, back then, I forget the Innocence Project. I consulted with them about helping me out and assisting me with this matter, but they only could go so far because there was no DNA back then. And so every case that was against my brother, he was convicted on the word of the victim.
Interesting.
Not a witness or anything in none of the cases, but what the victim stated. And I think that's critical because now people have DNA to fall back on to basically help them out.
Absolutely.
Corroborate a situation more so that if that person is guilty or innocent. When you say beyond a reasonable doubt,
right?
There should.
It's
be
more
no
than
doubt.
a swearing contest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
well, but what's interesting too, Darrell, is the fact that Tommy is serving under a law that is no longer in existence in Kentucky. Right.
That is a good point, Carl.
Right. I mean, in 1971. I mean, in 1971, this is alleged to have happened, but he's been and the Kentucky Revised Statutes changed, the sentencing guidelines, if you will, they all changed, or the sentencing criteria all changed.
So here's what happened when Kentucky brought Tommy back to Kentucky. I'm glad you brought that up because that is a very good point. The statute, the KRS statute that they tried him under was repealed. And
and repeal for our listeners means that it was no longer the law in Kentucky.
No longer a law. So in other words, the statute in 1971 allowed a person who was accused of that crime, rape, to get a life sentence.
Right. Before you go any further, let's just pause and just let me just point out that all of his victims were alleged to be white females.
They were all white.
All white females.
But also, what you probably don't know too is that when he was picked up in Atlanta, they basically had 50 charges against him.
Or 50 open cases.
Open cases is what I'm
said,
saying. Open cases, basically.
Yeah, here we have somebody, maybe.
And the lawyer took almost 3 months basically getting them dismissed and knocked out of the way because they just lodged all type of charges from all type of jurisdictions against them. And so,
right.
But again, they were all white women.
Right.
And I'm not saying this to slander or anything.
I mean, absolutely, because we're both former domestic violence prosecutors.
Oh, yeah.
So right,
I
absolutely.
understand rape to be a heinous crime, and I understand what a victim goes through. I basically taught a domestic violence class with the YWC up in Cincinnati for 3 years, and got an award for that and everything. And so you and I have tried cases,
right.
And so we're not sitting up here battering or beating up the victims in this
Absolutely
situation,
not.
but to say that there's a cloud over a lot of things that were going on. Why would you go back and get a repealed statute in 1971 that gives a man a life sentence? If the legislator thought it needed to be repealed, then it was a bad statute in the first place.
Right.
And so he comes back in 1977, and the statute was repealed in 1975, and they try him under the 1971 statute and give him a life sentence. Now, if he had been tried under the 1975 statute that was in place,
he'd be out. He'd
be out because he could have only got 10 to 20 years.
Right, right.
And he's been in the Kentucky system for 25 years.
Interesting. I understand that at some point, Tommy wrote a letter to the editor of a publication.
Yeah.
And you have that letter.
Yeah, and I like to read this letter because it helps, at least when I read it, it helped me to see where he was, how he's doing, his perspective on things, being incarcerated so many years. I will say this about Tommy and my family, because my mom was instrumental in this, is that she gave us that spiritual piece to address many, many issues in our lives that she knew we was going to have obstacles before us, and she wanted to make sure that she couldn't give us nothing else. She gave us that spiritual piece.
Right.
So I think that's what's keeping Tommy going.
Absolutely.
But more importantly, he wrote a editorial on reconciliation.
And your mom was a wonderful woman.
Well, I appreciate that.
A wonderful woman.
I appreciate that.
Miss Payne was just a wonderful woman. But when was this letter? What is the date of this letter?
This letter was written to a newspaper in August 30th, 2000, right before he came back from California. And it's called Reconciliation, Offender, Victim, and Society. And I'd like to read this because there are a lot of people, not just Tom Payne, but there are a lot of innocent people in jail. And there are a lot of families that are dealing with the things that we've been dealing with, trying to get them their loved ones out of jail. And so what this editorial seems to say that we have to find ways to reconcile the offender and the victim in society, because we can't warehouse people for the rest of their life in a penitentiary. So I would like to just read it. It's
go right ahead.
A real long letter. It says, Reconciliation, Offender, Victim, and Society. There is a perception that those who have committed crimes that have impacted with serious consequence on the lives of others are without conscious moral faculty and any redeemable human qualities. I will admit there are actions and behaviors that offend, shock, sear the conscious sensibilities of these human beings who contribute to the positive functioning and welfare of society. As one who has been convicted of a crime and paid dearly, I have seen through the spiritual eye of the offender and victim. I don't justify any unjust, deplorable actions which deprive, demean, and harm another human being. I raise this dialogue of restorative justice between offender, victim, and society as a mirror of reconciliation that embraces the historical and moral tenets of justice, fairness, opportunity, and human redemption. The internal fabric of our society is still supported by these life-enhancing principles. Being a convicted felon is a lonely, spiritually desolate, miserable, and disregarding personal experience, degrading personal experience. Notwithstanding a popular sentiment that inmates are watching TV and having fun in prison, most of the individuals that I witness on a daily basis are just barely surviving in anything resembling a healthy emotional state. I personally am aware of the stigma that affects the course of my life in all situations. When one's human credibility is always a suspect in attempting to develop positive and human interactions and relations, your mind's view is not on enjoying a prison experience. This is a racking condemnation to being a convicted felon. For many, the opinion is you are unworthy to ever partake of the fruits of the life and contribute to the well-being of family, community, and humanity. This is painful and disheartening. Besides myself, there are incarcerated men and women who have struggled in their inner sanctum to find restoration and peace. They are not unconscious of their acts, neither do they ignore the pain they have caused to victims, families, and violation of community trust. These men and women have sought forgiveness from God. They have prayed and wept for the healing, comfort, and restoration of those they have hurt. They have looked into the darkness and bleakness of their situation and trusted God to see light, to see a new opportunity of hope, and contribute what they have learned to the well-being of others. I submit there must be a place for these individuals who have developed in an environment of apathy and disregard. Not being able to undo past mistakes, they labor for redemption and grace in the present time. They seek this with their mind, heart, and daily efforts to unite with those who strive to eradicate the human suffering of crime, neglect, and abuse, which is a blight in our society. I don't advocate for all felons and criminals. I do raise my voice for those incarcerated men and women who seek the great mercy and blessings of God and who look towards the hope of helping to heal the rift between offender and victim in the nation. These men and women refuse to stay locked in the dark abyss of crime, emotional sickness, and bitterness. They seek the light. Their hope is a reinstatement of dignity and a recognition between themselves and society. It is said the quality of mercy is not strained. If so, then wisdom, a rightness of spirit must lead the human struggle. There is a door which can only be opened by the human heart and spirit. The offender who finds the key of love, compassion, and forgiveness should not be locked out, nor his or her peace offering be trampled upon.
Interesting. Wow. And that was written by Tommy in August of 2000. Wow. On that note, that's going to lead us into another break. This is Conscious Fever. I'm Carl Price. My guest tonight here on 97thebeatfm.com. My guest tonight is attorney Darrell Payne, now practicing in Cincinnati, Ohio, a native of Louisville, Kentucky, and the younger brother of Tom Payne, who is the subject of our story tonight. It's Conscious Fever, 97thebeatfm.com. We'll be right back right after this short break.
For real, I need Yeezy on this, man. Just wait until I get my hands on you. Bartender, around for her and around for me. Yeah. Say sugar, I want that cookie 'cause I bet it's sweet. Yeah. Bad girl, if you act rude, got a lesson to teach. Yeah. Hi mama, you got that fire, show me that heat. Yeah. Ooh, I ain't gon' play with it, give me one day with it, baby. When you leave, you'll be coming back. All up in your head with it, get you to the bed with it, turn you out, don't know how to act. Yes, work it, baby. All the time now, body moving, it's a crime now. Let me do my dues. Just wait until I get my hands on you. Atlanta, you from around Georgia, know you got that beach. Yeah. California, heard
Heard you got that water, I'll be at your beach.
Yeah, yeah.
Shot Town, you like it hood, I pull up on your street.
Yeah, yeah.
Perro Miami, SOS Team Baja Panty.
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, I ain't gon' play with it, give me one day with it, baby. When you leave, you be coming
I ain't gon' play.
all up in your head with it, get you to the bed with it. Turn you out, don't know how to act. Work it, baby. Overtime now. Gotta move that. It's a crime now. Let me do my dues. Just wait until I get my hands on you.
Hey, yeah, hey, don't it feel so man? Don't it feel so hey, woo, yeah, yeah, bring the hook back.
Let me do my dues. Just wait until I get my hands on you. Work it, baby. Oh yeah, body move, hey. Oh yeah, work it, baby. Oh body move, hey. Oh yeah.
Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebetfm.com.
Okay. This is Carl. Welcome back. This is Conscious Fever here on 97thebetfm.com. I'm Carl Price. My guest tonight is the younger brother, one of the younger brothers of Tom Payne, the subject of our discussion tonight, attorney Darrell Payne, now practicing in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a native of Louisville, Kentucky. We're going to continue on with our discussion, but before we do, I want to remind you all that new customers are entitled to $50 off at SKS, the tax professionals. SKS Tax Service, rapid plus refund equal relief. You can reach them online at www.sksfirm, that is sksfirm.com/tax, or you can visit them at any one of the many locations here, one in St. Matthews, Dixie, West Broadway, and I'll give you one of the numbers. You can call them at one of the numbers. The Dixie Highway office in West Louisville is, of course, 776-8407, of course, area code 502. And again, I want to encourage you all, particularly my Christian listeners, to get the book of Arise Esther. This is a book by Rochelle Morgan, Lessons and Meditations for Calling Out Your Inner Queen. A wonderful book, easy reading. Rochelle, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Just don't ask me any questions about it, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the book. But this is Conscious Fever. I'm Carl Price here on 97thebetfm.com as we continue our discussion about Tom Payne. And again, the research that I've done, Darrell, I'm just on this block now, or this stoop now, that I just believe that there is some heavy hand in the background saying, don't ever let Tommy out, although it's a parole violation. Justice is supposed to be blind in our profession, and without demeaning the victims of these crimes that he has been convicted of, 44 years. When you require someone to serve that amount of time, it's almost like the whole ideal, which is what they taught us in criminal justice, of the rehabilitative theory, just is non-existing. Mm-hmm. It's almost a punitive, situation. Mm-hmm. And even for those who get out and then reoffend, that doesn't make the system then punitive. It still is supposed to stay rehabilitative, with the rehabilitative model. So, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It is amazing to me that governors don't want to talk about Tom Payne. Coaches don't want to talk about Tom Payne. and nobody want to deal with this. I would just hope that the parole board does the right thing. I listened to the letter. I listened to legendary coach Dale Brown from legendary LSU coach Dale Brown, and just some such good things that have been said about Tommy, and my personal experience with Tommy when I made the visit out to California almost 25 years ago. It just seems that the opportunity to give that second chance, because it's always a second chance, has passed. So reconciliation, offender, victim, and society, and all the other things. Just talk to us about some of the other things you want to share with us about Tommy tonight before we leave the air.
Okay, just a couple more minutes, Carl. I just want to say to the listeners that my brother is going up for parole this year. He's done just about everything he can do. If you want to help or support Tom Payne, you can write a letter to the parole board in Frankfort, Kentucky. This has been a wilderness journey for Tom Payne and his family. I liken his experience to Moses in the wilderness with his people for 40 years. And we're not going to quit. We're not going to give up. And we're going to be here for him when he gets out. But we need everybody's help. I mean, think about it this way. Kaepernick, a fraternity brother of mine. Shout out to Kappa Alpha Psi.
Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, when you think about an African-American football player who kneeled in protest of black men being shot on the street and then get blackballed for doing that.
Right.
And not having the support behind him, from everybody should have supported, not just black people, white people should have supported him for that.
Right.
To me, that was no different than, and I'm not comparing apples to oranges, of a lot of the other things that are going on in this country, the Me Too movement and all those other things that get lots of support. And so we have to rally around these issues when we see things done wrong to people, whether it's my brother or someone in the street. As a community, if we don't rally around people like that, a lot of us are going to get burnt. And I'm sitting up here talking about my brother today, but that could very well be your brother. It could be
absolutely,
somebody else's relative or a spouse or anybody in the same situation down the road. So I just keep my brother in your prayers. I'm continuing to work and do whatever I got to do to help him get out. I'm going to be here for him when he does, and hopefully God has a plan for him.
So is it my understanding, because it seems like I read this somewhere, that he's eligible to see the parole board again this year?
Correct.
In November? November.
Yeah.
And so what can some of the listeners do to encourage the members of the parole board to give Tommy some serious consideration?
Yeah. I think a letter would be very supportive. We also have a Facebook, Thomas Payne, with petitions on it. You can go on and read more information about Tom Payne, what he's done, what he's been through, and what we're trying to do in terms of getting him emancipated.
Right. Tell me, there was something else, and I guess Darrell, we still look younger than we are. So, but I things pop in my mind and then it jumps right out. Yeah, you'll be 60. I mean, I'll be 57 in June. So, there was something I was going to ask you, and then it just jumped out of my mind. Oh, I know what it was. It was Jim Andrews. Now, who is Jim Andrews?
I'm glad you brought up Jim Andrews, because Jim Andrews has been an angel. He is a former teammate of Tom.
At the University of Kentucky?
At the University of Kentucky.
Okay.
They were competing for that position to start.
Okay.
So they were.
So they both were centers.
They both were centers. Jim Andrews, 6'11", and so Jim Andrews started writing my brother and going out to visit him. He also took Cameron Mills, and I don't know if you remember.
I do remember Cameron Mills. Yeah.
Mike Flynn too, with former Mr. Basketball, Indiana.
Yeah, the one from Indiana, not the one in Washington.
No,
No, not that Trump guy. Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
And so they went out and visited my brother. All of them are born again Christians. They went out and did a ministry for the inmates at
Okay.
the Grange, and so really, really good people. He's been very, very supportive, and he also showed up at my mom's funeral to offer his condolences and pay his respect. And so
Okay.
that meant a lot to Tommy because he hasn't been getting a lot of visitors these days. That's kind of sad. I think about all the people that were around him when he was on his feet.
Right. Well, and I was reading a report maybe a couple of years ago that I mean Tommy still loves the University of Kentucky.
Yeah, he does.
He has no bitterness
Yeah, he does.
against the University of Kentucky at all.
And I want to also clarify, too, about Adolph Rupp. A lot of people think that it was Adolph Rupp who was discriminatory and those type of things. And my brother had a really good relationship with Adolph Rupp. In fact, I would go on a limb and say that Adolph Rupp was hesitant himself, about having African Americans there because he didn't know if he could protect them. Going down to those southern cities and places, and he knew how they were acting. And because there was a African American that was playing at Vanderbilt who was a judge, I forget his name. He passed away just recently. He had gotten wind of all the things that he was going through, and so he was basically up against how do I keep this guy safe.
Right.
And so that was his mindset the whole time. Tommy was there, not necessarily not wanting him to be there and play ball.
Well, that's very interesting because in the research for this show, I kept coming across that. I kept coming across this thing that there has been this perception all of these years that Adolph Rupp was just this Klansman in the closet. He was just this devout racist. But everything I ran across was that, Adolph Rupp was just going along with the program. That he was really a nice guy, a gentle guy, just loved basketball, just loved winning.
I think the institution probably spoke more about the racist overtones that existed back then versus what Adolph Rupp stood for and what Adolph Rupp did.
So Adolph Rupp had marching orders, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Well, wow. Well, this is, this has been, some show. I want you to take us out with some additional comments if you have them about Tom. For all of those who are listening on TuneIn, through the TuneIn app, on 97thebeatfm.com, Apple TV, or however you're listening through the audio, those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, do us a favor. Write the parole board. Or even write Tommy. Because my understanding is he'll write you back.
Yeah.
He'll write you back, and I think you would be surprised about the person that you would have the opportunity to communicate with. Go to the Facebook page. I just think as a former prosecutor, for somebody who was prosecuted for almost 25 years here in Kentucky, and some would say I was one of the toughest. I will tell you that. Again, without minimizing the conduct or the convictions, I think he served his time. Nobody has been killed, although there are some women who have been raped, who have been sexually assaulted, that will say, "Hey, look, that is like they will contend that they have, and rightfully so, have suffered a lifetime." Of abuse. That was just not one act. That's a lasting thing forever. And I get that. But at some point, there has to be room in our society for second chances.
And forgiveness.
Absolutely, and forgiveness. And I think that's probably, what's really missing here. But again, this is Conscious Fever, and we say things that you're not going to hear on the network TVs and different things like that. And I just really think that there's a heavy hand out there saying, we don't want Tom Payne out. And I don't understand why that's the case. I remember there was some story about that one of the white female victims in Atlanta just happened to be from Lexington, Kentucky. Is there a conspiracy theory out there that was she planted to go, I don't know. But I'm just saying. So I'm not justifying his behavior if he has been convicted, because we have to respect, the jury system with a grain of salt, because it was it was the middle 70s, and it was a black man on trial with a white woman who had been identified, and no DNA evidence. No DNA evidence, at all. Which brings up a really interesting point, because you were saying something earlier when you were saying that it was just simply a swearing contest.
Yeah.
In terms of the trials. And I would tell you this, that if any of you all have Netflix, and I don't want to promote Netflix because they don't pay us here, but I would tell you this: if you have Netflix, there's a show on Netflix called Brain Games, or Brain Games. Go watch that, and when you watch that, you will then believe that anybody who has been sent to the penitentiary or sent to jail based upon identification probably shouldn't be there. Because when you watch that show basically tells you about how your brain fools you into believing certain perceptions that are in front of you. So saying that he's the one that did it is an easy thing for a human being to say and be entirely incorrect. At least according to the psychologists and the PhDs on that particular show. So I thought it was very interesting. Any closing remarks, Darrell?
Yeah, I want to say thank you so much, Carl. You've always been a true friend. I'm looking forward to maybe about 5 years seeing when your face smeared on one of them buildings.
I hope not.
Carl's
Louisville.
Griffin, Carl's Louisville.
Yeah.
Because, really, you're a very compassionate brother. You're always out there trying to help people do the right thing, and we need more people like you.
Well, that's a very nice thing for you to say.
And I also want to say this is not an easy topic to talk about because we are attorneys. I have been a prosecutor. That is my brother. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to just share and talk about my feelings. So it was nerve-wracking coming here thinking about what I was going to say, what people might think. But, the bottom line is that everyone deserves a second chance.
Right,
a
absolutely.
third chance, a fourth chance. I'm not saying to put very, very dangerous people back on the street, but I also think that a person, after they've done their time, ought to be given another opportunity to basically rectify their wrong.
Absolutely. Well, Darrell, again, I want to say thank you for taking the time and joining us on the show. And I think my audience knows that legendary college basketball coaches don't call in every week.
Oh, yeah.
So it was probably because of you that the legendary coach of LSU, Dale Brown, called in and gave us a visit and gave us some really, really interesting and very, very good and intriguing comments about Tom and just about the system overall. There is a part in the Bible. I think the book is I always get in trouble when I try to pronounce this book, Ecclesiastics. There's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry, there's a time for everything. And there's a time to be fair and be just. And whatever venom that you may have harbored because of what my theory about this whole thing with Tom and my research and everything that I'm seeing is that there's a heavy hand. So I just believe that there's a heavy hand somewhere. I really do. I really do believe that there's a heavy hand somewhere, because if I go back to 1969 when he was signed, this was something that, and University of Kentucky did it first in the SEC. And when they did, and I think I've said this twice already on the show, but I think it's worth saying again, is that, they went out on the limb. And so they went out on the limb for Tommy because they wanted more championships. They knew that the tide was changing. In 1966, they went to what is now known as University of Texas at El Paso, and which was Texas Western, and got their ass beat. Mm-hmm. It was a good game. I've actually watched the whole game. It was a good game. Louis Dampier and all those guys.
Pat Riley.
Pat Riley. It was a good game. But they got their ass beat, and the significance of that right in the middle of the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. All these 5 black starters is beating the historic Kentucky Kings.
And the coach intentionally started 5 black starters.
Absolutely.
To make that point. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So having that, and then it took 3 years for the University of Kentucky to say that, we're going to pursue this guy. And Tommy was not the only one in the backyard of the University of Kentucky, African-American players back then. Mm-hmm. right? He was not the only one. There were a lot more, but University of Kentucky was
They also recruited Wes Unseld and Butch Beard.
Right. Now I did read about Butch Beard.
Yeah.
But so I think that there was an investment for the University of Kentucky that it's kind of like throwing your money in the stock market and not getting anything back. And sometimes we all get pissed off when that happens, right? It's like, damn, I lost my money, because I invested in this. So I invested in Tommy, and literally, from the literature that I read, I mean, Tommy gave them one season. Pretty much, right? Just one season, and they wanted more because they wanted to be the pioneering school in the SEC. And I just think it's really, really interesting history and to hear about how it was going to the games. You were 12 years old at the time. You're with your dad, who was a master sergeant in the United States Army, and just hearing all these racial epithets and all these bad insults thrown at your brother, simply because of the color of his skin. And you look at the SEC today, and you look at Alabama. I mean, Alabama is a black coach
and a trickling of number of white ball players.
Right.
Sort of reverse.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So interesting enough. But so Darrell, again, thank you for joining me.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank. For all of you all there out on the Facebook Live post, thank you for joining me tonight. Just so you know, I won't be here next week. Next week is spring break here in Louisville, so there are some things that that we've got to take care of in another state. But we will be back the week afterwards. Is that right, DJ Ice?
Yes.
We'll be back the week after that. And because I was actually trying to get a special host next week. I was going to bring Judge Delahanty back next week just to host a show.
Oh, well, if he wants to, he can.
But I haven't had the conversation. I'll talk to him. So we may have a special host next week on Conscious Fever, Judge Delahanty. He may come on and talk about racial equality and give us some good jazz music like he did before, right, DJ Ice?
Yes,
I mean, he has some good music, music choices, man. Judge Sean Delahanty. So if you're listening, or Donna, if you're listening, just tell Sean I'm going to reach out to him tomorrow and actually try to do that. But when I come back, we're going to be just a couple of weeks away from the boxing match. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we're going to be giving away tickets here. But here's the catch. Just so you know, I'm going to leave you guys with this. Here's the catch. If you want to win a ticket to the boxing match, KFC Yum Center, that's going to be, the WC, April 27th. It's going to be live on ESPN. First of all, we have to fill the place because we have two young men that are continuing Muhammad Ali's legacy here in Louisville. Two young, good boxers. But if you want tickets, and one of the tickets may be down on the floor, according to this chart here, we're going to be giving away tickets. And when we give away those tickets, I want you to know that in order to win those tickets, you got to call in here at the station, 502-384-6483, and you've got to figure out the correct answer to the question. And I'm going to tell you what the question is now. The question is, you have to guess the TV show that the song that you hear, that DJ Ice plays. You got to, if you're the first caller, to tell us where that song, what TV show that song is from, then you win the tickets. It's really just that simple. So it could be Welcome Back, Carter. It could be I want to go where everybody knows your name. Could be that. It could be you can turn the world around with a smile. Mary Tyler Moore. You right? I mean, it could be any of those. It could be Rawhide. Could be Batman. Could be Gunsmoke. But whatever it is, if you call in, we're going to give you a ticket to the boxing match. So again, this is Conscious Fever, 97thebeatfm.com. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night.
Get my card now.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
502, stand up. These are just jokes. No harm is ever intended. Absolutely no one is to be offended. Is bringing you his monthly comedy show held at the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel. Big Mike's Comedy Blast, 2735 Crittenden Drive. Again, that Hilton Garden Inn Hotel, 2735 Crittenden Drive. Big Mike's Comedy Blast. And on stage this month we have comedian Marvin Hunter.
Louisville, Kentucky. It's your boy, comedian Marvin Hunter, man. April 14th, man. April 14th. Don't miss it, man. Big Mike's Comedy Fest at the Hilton Garden Inn by the airport. We're going to be there showing our natural behind, man. I'm trying to get some of that Kentucky bourbon y'all have up there, man. Make sure y'all show up, man. You don't want to miss this. I'm going to keep my zipper all the way down so it'll be easy for me to take my pants off and show my natural ass. You know how I get out. But it's your boy, comedian Marvin Hunter.
For this event, you must be 18 to enter, 21 to drink. Doors open at 7. Show starts at 8:30. Tickets can be purchased from Eventbrite or Jam Bust Balloons and more or Shelock's Beauty Salon. DJ Ice on the ones and twos. And remember, always, clapping is optional, but laughter is a must. Get your tickets now.
This beat make you wanna do an old school dance, don't it? It make you wanna do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance. Let me see you do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance, don't it? It make you wanna do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance. Let me see you do an old school dance. Ain't no party like an old school party, cause old school music go hard. If you love yourself like I love myself, let me hear somebody make noise. That old school taught us how to stick together, spend money with each other, we'll be rich forever. Hustle for your fam, make sure everybody's straight. Put food on the table, make sure everybody ate. If it wasn't for the old, wouldn't be no music, wouldn't be no love, wouldn't be no groove, wouldn't be no jamming till 6 in the morning. Old school music made the party keep going. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance, don't it? It make you wanna do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance. Let me see you do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance, don't it? Make you wanna do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance. Let me see you do an old school dance. Hey, I was at this club, it was old school night. Okay. The DJ had them all on the dance floor, right? Look at them. You should have seen them doing old school dances. Hey. Everybody was doing old school dances. Birthday parties, they had drinks all over. A lot of celebrating, wasn't nobody sober. Dressed up the bar, so I sat at the bar. Seen something sexy watching me from afar. She walked up and said, I wanna know who you are. Okay. You over here shining, so I know you a star. I told her first name Poke, last name Jones. I just came out to get my old school on. Get it, beat make you wanna do an old school dance, don't it? It make you wanna do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance. Let me see you do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance, don't it? Make you wanna do an old school dance. This beat make you wanna do an old school dance. Let me see you do an old school dance. That old school make you feel good on your worst days. Right now, let's do it for the birthdays. Aries, do that old school dance. Taurus, do an old school dance. Hey, Geminis, do that old school dance. Cancers, do an old school dance. Where the Leos at, do an old school dance. Virgos, do an old school dance. Hey, Libras, do an old school dance. Scorpios, do an old school dance. Sagittarius, do an old school dance. Capricorns, do an old school dance. Aquarius, do an old school dance. Pisces, do an old school